Yeah, so moving on. Cities occupy just 3% of Earth's land. You see these stats, but account for 60 to 80% of energy consumption and 75% of carbon emissions. Many cities are also more vulnerable to climate change and natural disasters due to their high concentration of people and location. So, building urban resilience is crucial to avoid human, social, and economic losses. So, if you see these stats, only 3% of like whole world's like a land area is occupied by cities in total, but 60 to 80% energy consumption is taken by these cities, and 75% they contribute to the emissions. Okay, that is the statistic. Like it's very concentrated, like a form of a consumer. You can call cities are such a big like a consumer, right? And emitters, of course, like 3/4 of the total emission comes from the cities. Many cities, yeah. And this is where it becomes essential, because the density is very high. You see 3% of like the total like a land surface, like Earth's land, and like a huge percentage of like a population. Like, well, it varies from every country to country, but that is increasing. That's the trend. Like all of the places everywhere, I think cities population is gradually increasing. Okay, and that puts like a big like a risk, because so wherever there is a risk, there should be like resilience, right? That thing. So that is what needs to be done with SDG like 11. Why should I care? Well, we are also part of this whole system. Somewhere ourselves or our family, our friends, our relatives, our colleagues, they are in the cities. Okay, and for other regions also, since urban and rural is just divided for its functioning. Otherwise, they are like a human habitation, right? And supplies, resources, and a lot of things are like getting exchanged from like every part to the other part. That's why it is essential. All these issues which eventually affect every citizen. Yeah, inequality can lead to unrest and insecurity. Pollution deteriorates everyone's health and affects workers' productivity and therefore the economy. Okay, the natural disasters have the potential to disrupt everyone's lifestyle. Yeah, and if you see natural disasters, well, they can impact like everybody's and anybody's life. Okay, irrespective of whether you are directly impacted or not. If some place or some like a region of your country is impacted, okay, you feel like that like the other type of like effects and consequences in the coming months. What happens if cities are just left to grow organically, like randomly on the way they are growing, without regulation, without any control or checks? The cost of poorly planned urbanization can be seen in some of the huge slums. Okay, this is how it will happen if you just leave it like that. Tangled traffic, greenhouse gas emissions, and sprawling suburbs all over the world. By choosing to act sustainably, we choose to build cities where all citizens live in a decent quality of life and form a part of the city's productive dynamic, creating shared prosperity and social stability without harming the environment. As of May 2020, the majority of the national and city governments are revisiting urban planning to help prevent the next pandemic. Yeah, so various like regions are there, and like why we need a controlled like a growth. Well, even in the villages also, if you see, if it is not controlled, if it is not regulated by like some rules, regulation, and like bylaws, okay, the development, the like building of houses or building of any manufacturing unit, any factory, anything can happen anywhere. So that will be a very totally like a mindless kind of situation, because in any like if you are given with like some resources, like land is a precious resource, so this must be divided based on like the proportion of like the things which are needed for agriculture, for forest, right, for cities, urban habitations, right, for manufacturing industries and all of those things, public administration, even roads are also like overall, if they also take like a major like a surface area of our planet, so roads, right, and many other things. Okay, and then the free like swaths of land where like other wild animals and wild species of flora also can survive, right? So we cannot capture the whole world, we cannot pave the entire planet surface for like a human habitation. Is going to kill it. right? So it definitely requires, a check and like a measurement, so that how much is sustainable, how much of like this can be occupied or can be taken for like some particular purpose, okay, to maintain like that ecological balance and all of those things, right? Yeah. Is it expensive to put sustainable practices in place? And that's like a myth, that sustainable things are actually costly. Well, if you put in your thoughts and planning, in your drawing board stage, that means initial stages of your planning and like estimation, right? Definitely you can optimize and minimize the overall costing, right? You can bring it down, okay, and overall it helps, like in efficiency also, the kind of output you are expecting, from X input, right? So that you can maximize and like bring it to the like economical like aspects also. So green things are not necessarily costly always. Well, they may be if you are investing as a kind of a capital investment or things like that. So it may be little pricier, but the returns what you are going to get, on or your investments ROI, right? So in that also you can manage it. So there may be like a multiple ways how you can economize on the investment. Let me read this. The cost is minimal in comparison with the benefits. For example, there is a cost to creating a functional public transport network, like mass rapid transportation systems, or like railways, like buses and all of that. But the benefits are huge in terms of economic activity, quality of life and environment, and overall success of a networked city. So if you see, if everybody starts like driving a car, okay, and all the public of a city start riding, so how much of surface area of road will be needed, how much of parking spaces are needed, how much of like emissions all of these vehicles are going to generate and all of that. So per person, per capita, what will be the overall cost, cost to the environment, cost to the society, cost to the economics, pollution, right, emissions, manufacturing, energy investments, all of those if you compare, it will be huge, right? So like we know, it's a proven fact, for example 2030, like a group of people, if they want to travel, right, so buses are still like the most economical, not just on cost but on environmental like a factors also, so why not to invest in a like a transportation infrastructure for the whole city and save on the personal vehicles. That's why like a promotion of like metros and local railways, buses, city buses and everything is promoted. What can I do to help achieve this goal as an individual, right? So take an active interest in the governance and management of your city, maybe based on your like expertise area, subject knowledge, or wherever you are in whatever position, you can engage yourself into any of such like activities. Advocate for the kind of city you believe you need. Develop a vision for your building, street and neighborhood, and act on that vision. Are there enough jobs? Can your children walk to school safely? Can you walk with your family at night on the street? How far is the nearest public transport from your place? What's the air quality like? What are your shared public spaces like? The better conditions you create in your community, the greater the effect on your quality of life. So all of these questions, if you see, they are applicable to all of us. Nobody can say that you're not going to use your street or the road, you're not going to avail public transportation, your family members are not going to go to the market or like education or hospital. Okay, all of these things, if you see, are part of our everyday life, okay, irrespective of our place, even in the rural areas, even in the towns, villages, cities, everywhere, right? So all of these questions, definitely, maybe some of these questions will be aligned to your interest or your needs. Maybe you can start pursuing these and start questioning the local management, local administration, and start bringing change by yourself, right? So yeah, more details here. Some facts and figures. Before COVID-19, share of urban population living in slums rose to 24% in 2018. 24%, almost, 1/4, slums, of urban population. So if this is a city, almost 24%, before pandemic was living in the slum area. Just imagine, you know, 1/4. Well, COVID-19 implications, if you see, over 90% of COVID-19 cases are in urban areas. So out of this 100%, 90% of it was affected, you know, because of COVID. And in that too also, maybe, you know, like this densely packed, you know, like region, you know, this 24% was perhaps the, you know, like a biggest, you know, like contracting, you know, like a place in a single this thing. If you see, we saw in the previous slides, only half the world's urban population has convenient access to public transport as per 2019, only half. Okay. 500 to 1000 meters distance. So this is the, you know, like a public convenience, you know, we are talking about from your place of, you know, like a living, you know, this should be in the vicinity of like, you know, like a 1 kilometer. Okay, then you can say this is a convenient access for you, that you can walk, cycle, or take an auto rickshaw or something like that. Air pollution caused 4.2 million premature deaths in 2016. That's 42 lakhs, you know, we are talking about. Of course, these figures are like, you know, global, you know, like a figures, but still, you know, out of this, if you see the most polluted cities of the world, I think several of them, you know, will come from our country, right? So I'm sure a pretty, you know, like a high, you know, like a percentage of this, you know, will be from, you know, like our country or from South Asian region, right? So this is an eye opener, like how, you know, like air quality index, you know, of you know, like these urban areas, you know, can be improved. 47% of population live within 400 meters walking distance to open public spaces. Okay, so that's a very good, you know, like a feature. At least 47% of people, you know, they have, you know, like some open space, maybe parks, you know, gardens and, you know, open spaces, you know, walking distance, you know, like a length, but remaining yet to be like a governed, you know, 53% are yet to get that, and that means they are, you know, like a beyond 400 meters, you know, like a distance. Yeah, so let's see some targets. By 2030, ensure access for all to adequate, safe and affordable housing. So everybody gets a house, because you may have seen a lot of buildings, flats and apartments coming up in the cities, but still a huge population lives on rent, or they are unable to, you know, like find even a nice, you know, the decent rented accommodation, and that's how they'll end up in the slum areas. Okay, so if this is taken care of, you know, slums will definitely reduce. Okay, so there is a direct, you know, like a correlation. Affordable housing, you know, a decent housing place. By 2030, reduce the number of deaths and people affected, you know, to economic losses caused by disasters. Right? By 2030, provide access to safe, affordable, accessible and sustainable transport system for everyone. Support positive economic, social and environmental links between urban, pre-urban, rural areas. By 2030, reduce the adverse per capita environmental impact of cities. This is a very important part. By 2020, increase the number of cities adopting the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. So maybe you can search for it separately, Sendai framework for DRR, disaster risk reduction. Okay, you will get you know, like a comprehensive document, you know, which talks about what should be the, you know, like a measures and, you know, like a checks and, you know, like a policies and, you know, like a action plans, you know, for, you know, like making cities and a resilient, you know, place, you know, for facing, you know, like any eventual, you know, natural or man-made, you know, like a disaster, because, you know, sometimes you cannot predict. Well, some of these things are predictable, like, you know, if a city is particularly located in you know, earthquake zone 5, for example, right? So obviously, you know, beforehand this is a, you know, very high risk, you know, like a zone. So how the design of buildings or structures, you know, streets, roads, you know, are going to be like, you know, you can work for that, you know, like open spaces, refuge areas and all of those things. But some of things, you know, cannot be predicted. For example, you know, like a tsunamis, you know, like stuff, you know, they are once in a blue moon, you know, they occur after, you know, like several decades and years, right? But yes, whenever they occur, the amount of, you know, like the magnitude of you know, like damage is really big, right? So we need, you know, comprehensive, resilient, you know, like a plans, and that you get, you know, from this document. So Sendai framework for DRR, you should, you know, search for it separately. By 2030, enhance inclusive and sustainable urbanization and capacity for participation integrated in sustainable human settlements. Strengthen efforts to protect and safeguard the world's cultural and natural heritage. By 2030, provide universal access to safe, inclusive, accessible, green and public spaces. Universal access. Yeah. Support least developed countries in building sustainable and resilient buildings with local materials. Yeah. So, well, with the local materials, then another very interesting, like a chapter opens up. I have discussed in my another NPTEL course, strategies for sustainable design. Like, what is a sustainable design? In that, like there are one of the recommendations that if you are sourcing some, like a material, from beyond a radius of 500 kilometers, okay, the indirect emissions, which are going to happen, for its transportation and other, like a stuff, is going to be higher, perhaps more than the manufacturing itself, right? So that is the like additional burden you are creating on the ecosystem, right? So to save on that, like most of the materials, should be sourced, from the radius of like a 500 kilometers. Okay, that will make it sustainable. That's why like it is mentioning local material. Well, local materials carry another unique feature that they are part of that like a geography, like that climate, right? So they are in a better capacity to respond to the extremes of like that climate. For example, too hot if it gets, okay, you can use the local materials of like a thatch, like a mud, right, etc. To improve on the like overall like energy efficiency of your building, right? And similarly, there could be multiple such examples. Yeah, so very common, like a site of, like a cities. Okay, if you see in this image, this, like a road network, right, is elevated to give a signal free and fast, transportation, like a mode in the city. But if you see, these are, like a houses, residential areas. Again, apartments over here. Again, apartments, like a living, like a houses over here. It looks like, offices and corporate, like are in this sector, in this area perhaps. Okay. So, there may be, like a lot of noise pollution, from this place, air pollution, of course, right? And yeah, it's eating, like so much of space. If you see, they have derived, like a park, at the ground floor over here. And these, like breezes are, like elevated. So at least some, land is reclaimed over here. Okay, one can go and take a walk in this area. But still, like there may be, like a chances of air and noise pollution from this highway, since it is passing, usually from, like this residential, like a neighborhood, right? But yes, at least, something is better, like some, like points are better, that now this traffic is not, like running on the, like a ground surface, because it will kind of eat up, like that much space. Plus, it will be difficult for like a people at living in this area to commute, because if it is a long distance, like a travel, long distance route, okay, then person from far away places, if they want to travel to another far away places, they can pass quickly and smoothly, right? So multiple such interventions. Let's see. So at the city level, what do you think are the like key interactions in the city itself? Okay, so you can see like from this source, well, a city has like a population and population's growth. If there is population, so most of the places population is increasing, okay, then city has like there may be like some regions which might cause migration. There may be some benefits that people will be landing in there, that's immigration, okay, and other socio-economic development and its own culture and things. So as a whole, it puts up a demand pressure. What are those demand pressures? Water usage, since it is a concentrated, like a very dense population, right? So concentrated water use, urban agriculture, wastewater, land use change, from maybe a flat land to now is a highly, like a dense populated land. Transportation, excessive energy uses because of like now cities are running on the like electricity 24 hour. Even if you take out electricity for 5 minutes, most of the things are going to get like a halt. Like railways will stop, metro will stop, healthcare facilities will stop, right? Lifts will start will stop working and things like that, right? So we are so much dependent on like energy, and in that also uninterrupted energy supply. If there is interruption, there is like some issue is going to happen, right? And waste management, etc., etc., and all of these are causing like some sort of like an impact. Okay, one of those impacts is like a GHG emission and many other type of like impact. Okay, so if you take just like a GHGs over here, okay, that's a major contributor to the climate change, right? So that's what we are discussing, is cities are definitely directly causing like a climate change impact, right? So increase in temperature, like initially we discussed, UHIE, urban heat island effect, then change in rainfall patterns. Okay, so you may have observed, I think most of the places now they are experiencing like abrupt changes in the like a pattern of like a weather, like and climate, like annual climates or decadal climates, right? Either there are like too much of like rain, or there is like a very less like rain, kind of like creating drought kind of situation. So either it is flooding, or is it like creating a drought. Okay, so the both of these are like unfavorable and like extreme cases, right? So those kind of things, yeah, sea level rising, extreme weather events, etc., like this. Okay, which in turn is putting pressure again on the human society and the ecology and the environment, everyone. There is like a question on the water security. Okay, you cannot guarantee. There are questions on the food security. You cannot guarantee. If something happens, if a flood or flooding and drought happens, there's a direct impact to the food security. Overall balance of the ecosystem, human health. Okay, directly human health, we have been discussing it, like pollution, all of those things, too much of pressure, distance, human society as an overall will degrade, a lot of pressure on infrastructure, a lot of pressure on energy security, right? You cannot guarantee, or even if you guarantee, what if like something happens, like DRR kind of like a thing. Okay, disaster, if it stucks, right? So all of these are going to get like under pressure. Okay, and in turn it will again impact the whole city, right? So if you see, it's a kind of like a is shaping this also, in turn this is helping also, so it is working both ways. If you see, it is working both ways, here also, here also, here also, here also. So cities and climate change impact, there is a direct correlation. Okay, if we manage cities well, we can definitely manage like these like a supply pressure also in a very efficient manner. If we are not able to like manage it nicely, there will be a lot of like a pressure, tremendous pressure, and it may collapse also. So in extreme cases, cities might fail. Okay, so you may have seen in the last few years, extreme short supply of water in the summer seasons, has caused like mini migrations also. People were forced to like leave their homes and go to maybe another part of the city, or maybe like far away places where there was like a supply of water, because without water you cannot live, right? And such a challenging situation actually kind of got arised in those places that caused like that mini migration kind of like a thing, right? So if you see in a nutshell, this is this demand pressure, and since you cannot guarantee the supply of these, then there is a problematic situation. So this is the kind of complex dynamics between city and climate change, you can understand. Yeah. So if we see the current trend, like it suggests the urbanization is going to increase at much faster like rate with every like coming decade. So in a way we can say as of now that urbanization is an unstoppable phenomenon. Okay, the world is rapidly moving towards like a urbanization, from rural, like Indian economy also, if you see in the previous like a part of like a decades, early decades of like right after the independence. Okay, we used to be more like a social kind of like economy, most based on agrarian kind of things. But then was like huge measures taken for improving the manufacturing sector, product sector, industrial sector, construction, etc., etc. Okay, even service sector. And now you know from mixed use economy to more towards like a capitalistic economy. Okay, so that migration is actually slowly like happening and that is causing this fast like urbanization, and most of the places, most of the countries are having the similar kind of scenarios. So here, yeah, so let's see this data. The world's population living in cities or urban centers has risen steadily over the years. 2007, little over 50% to 60%. It is expected to reach this figure by 2030, and by 2050, it is estimated that like a two-third of it is going to be you know in the cities, right? So from 50% to like a two-third, like 66%, and it may rise again and again, more and more and more. I don't know what future, what lies in the future, right? So urban areas will be increasingly critical for achieving all SDGs and integrating the social, economics and environmental goals set forth in the 2030 agenda. From 2010 to 2050, 2.5 to 3 billion people will be added to the urban population worldwide. 3 billion, that is the estimate. Currently, we are 8 billion, right? Yeah. So, yeah, some numbers like cities contribute to 80% of global GDP. Only 20% comes from the rural areas. 70% of global energy consumption, 70% of global carbon emissions also, right? So that is the contribution cities are currently at. Yeah, let's see some like a targets. By 2030, ensure access to all adequate, safe, and this we have seen. Maybe you can go through this in more detail, and there like a current indicators are given. Yeah, interlinkages. So since SDG 11 is a crucial one, right? The majority of the population right now also, if you see in the just few years back, 50% of population was living in cities, and it is expected is going to rise to 66% by 2050, right? So that's the two-third of the population. So definitely it has like a direct relation with many other SDGs also, from the first one to second one to the health and well-being, everyone, so you see, from like a target 11.1, we have this connection to no poverty, for their targets 1.1, 1.2, 1.4, okay, and then to the poverty also 11.2, we have two targets from here. From third also you can see we have to the clean energy, clean energy, better for good health and well-being, quality education, is coming from 11.2 also, 11.3 also, 11.5 and 11.7. 2 is coming to the gender equality, right? And why there is no direct correlation to quality education? Well, I'm surprised to see. Okay, maybe these like targets, they are not directly talking about like this one, but quality education is extremely essential, whether it is rural or urban or any like a such setting, because like we have discussed in like this SDG, how it is going to shape a good like a citizen to the whole like a country, to the whole world, and how a good like a citizen can be a productive like a citizen also, who is not creating a liability on the society, rather it is becoming an asset, right? And like adding all other like SDGs too, right? So yeah, that thing, gender equality, then water related direct, clean energy, decent work and economic growth. Well, of course, cities are very much essential like a part of this. Yeah, nice infrastructure, innovation, yeah, reduce inequalities. I think like some connections. Well, if you see, if this is not directly related, but the targets which are like a linking for quality education to the overall like this thing are given over here. Maybe you can search for these separately, so you will find, and some connections here also: reduced inequalities, consumption, CC, life water below water, above land, peace, justice, and finally partnerships. So in a way, if you see, I think any place of habitation will definitely like will form like a part of any and all of these like SDGs. Yeah, so that link, okay, so there is definitely a link, and that's an unbroken, like a link, and which carries a direct, like an impact, okay. So responsible land governance, including secure tenure, is a key factor that will greatly influence achievement of inclusive, safe, resilient and sustainable cities and human settlements as reflected in SDG 11. The growth and development of cities cannot be dealing from anchor of its foundation, the land in which it is planned, built and developed. Access to secure tenure rights to land and property remains one of the major challenges facing most cities in the world, especially in developing countries. When tenure rights are safeguarded and promoted in cities, such a practice serves as an incentive for durable and sustainable economic development for all, including small businesses, enterprises to mega projects. Development of cities and human settlements that apply integrated land planning, management and governance policies where land rights for all women, children, men, disabled, etc. are secure is a global practice that guarantees peaceful coexistence, generates high returns on land-based taxations and other levies that leverage other sources of finances for city development, and increases conditions for access to adequate and affordable housing from capital investment. Right? The global importance of land in achieving SDGs is explicitly acknowledged in SDG 1, no poverty. The SDGs further provide us with the specific target 1.4, indicator 1.4.2, proportion of land, etc., etc. So you can see in like these details how cities, well, of course cities are based on land itself, right? Currently we do not have cities floating in the air, right, or floating in the water. So everywhere cities are on land only, maybe at the seashore, maybe at by the bank of river, or even in a landlocked a position, but it is always there on some land. Okay, so there is a direct with this land to the city which is sitting on this land, right? You can see this like a sketch. Okay, so a water body, of course you are going to consume a water from this water body, right? So I think you may be aware of a situation of Yamuna river, right, in the city of Delhi, New Delhi, right? So yeah, similarly I think there are a lot of examples, right, from different places. When one of the major challenges with these river systems is that we are drawing water from this. Okay, well, drawing water is essential for irrigation, water supply, right, and meeting our demands. But what happens to the river? What happens to the rights of the river? If you are removing all the water, if you are taking out all the water from the river is simply dead, right? So actually, if it is the human society which is creating the stress on the river itself, and now that river which is deprived of its own water is filled with the sewer, right? So now the river has turned into a drain, nothing less than that. So that is the situation. Like Yamuna naturally, or any other river across the world, whatever condition they are into today is because of the such a mindless exploitation of these resources, right? So there must be some checks and measures to treat these rivers as a rightful owner of their own resources. Like river is the owner of its resource, right? So the rivers like a water should some level of water must be maintained in the river itself, because otherwise a river is going to get simply die, right? So I think that way.